what overhangs the sector in general is the risk of geopolitical risk, Middle Eastern war, Ukraine war, Trump tariffs, although that seems to be receding. So there's lots of kind of overall risk, but on a day-to-day basis, the industry has never been stronger. The demand for air travel into summer 25 is strong across Europe. We're seeing load factors slightly up at this time last year. Our pricing, I think was the most important thing about our results this morning, is in a year where our average fares went down by 7%, we grew traffic 9%, but we still made €8 net profit per passenger. Pricing into this summer looks stronger. The question is, will we get back all of last year's 7% decline? I'm not sure we will, but we'll get most of it. And that should feed through to a very strong bottom line over the next 12 months.
Can you give us more detail in terms of what you're seeing in terms of that summer demand?
Yeah, I mean, if you take the June quarter, now it's a little bit distorted because both half of Easter last year was in March, both halves of Easter this year were in April. But I mean, we're looking at the first quarter here. Average pricing is up a mid-teens on where it was last year. It will be lower in the second quarter, which is the key July, August, September. But we think, it's somewhere in the mid-single-digit price recovery.
What destinations are most popular?
Excuse me. We're so big. I mean, the strongest growth at the moment is still the traditional ones: Spain, Italy, Greece is doing very well for the summer. We're seeing quite good growth back into the UK, particularly regional UK, Belfast, Glasgow, Edinburgh doing well. London's struggling a bit. We don't have much airport capacity growth in London. But overall, the whole of Europe seems to be travelling. I think there's a reluctance to go transatlantic at the moment. I think there's been a dip in transatlantic traffic and more Europeans holidaying at home. Huge volumes of Americans coming to Europe for the summer. So I think, it's going to be a strong summer in Europe.
I wanted to ask you about that transatlantic story, because you have seen some of the US carriers, of course, talking about a slowdown in terms of the transatlantic.
Sure.
So to be clear, you are seeing more European travel within Europe from Europeans who might otherwise have gone stateside?
I think so. I mean, there isn't a lot of capacity growth in Europe this year, even in Ryanair's case, and we're usually the fastest growing airline in Europe. Because of Boeing delivery delays, we're only going to grow 3% this year from 200 to 206 million passengers. But there is very strong demand. I think, the economy is recovering across Europe. There isn't much growth, but people are determined to go on holidays. And I think the trend of them holidaying at home in Europe as opposed to going long haul continues.
What is happening on Boeing? Give us an update. Have you had what's the latest conversation you had with Kelly Ortberg, the CEO of Boeing? Have you had that conversation?
I think they're doing very well. I spoke to Kelly and Stephanie Pope in the last 2 weeks. The 5 aircraft, our last 5 deliveries this year, which were due in April, all arrived a couple of days early, which is a good sign. We have 29 aircraft scheduled in the fourth quarter this year through October, November, December. They look like they're on track. The hulls are currently being manufactured in Wichita. So I think Boeing are getting on top of it. We're not going to go through this summer with loads of delivery delays. The big issue for us with Boeing is, will they get the MAX 7 and 10 certified? They're getting increasingly confident they'll certify it at the end of this year, because we have our first 15 of those MAX 10 aircraft due for delivery in the spring of 2027. And this is critical to our continuing growth and profitability. These aircraft have 20% more seats, burn 20% less fuel, and they are going to strategically lower our unit cost per passenger going forward.
Does that certification happen this year? Is it a 2026 story?
They're saying at the back end of this year. They're saying it's the latter half of 2025. So a good 18 months before we're due to take our first deliveries.
What about the risk? So what about the risk of tariffs? So the EU is considering potentially, as part of its retaliation, if it doesn't come to an agreement, tariffs on goods. It could include Boeing aircraft, of course.
It could.
What would your message be to Brussels on that?
Well, our message would be, there's a 1979 agreement that exempts commercial aircraft. I don't think it's in Airbus's interest or in Boeing's interest to have tariffs applied on aircraft. Airbus sell as many long-haul aircraft to the US carriers as Boeing does to the European carriers. So it would be a self-inflicted wound. But I think our experience with Trump and the tariffs is, he talks tough and then they walk it back pretty quickly. You saw the deal with the Chinese, the deal with the UK. I'm not sure it will. I'm not that worried about tariffs on commercial aircraft.
Does the deal with the UK and the US, does that mean you could source the aircraft from the UK then? Would you look to that?
It's a possibility. I mean, one of the alternatives is we could take the aircraft in through the UK, but ultimately we have a fixed price agreement with Boeing, and our discussion with Boeing, our tariffs are Boeing's problem, not ours.
What is happening in terms of your letter? So you wrote a letter to lawmakers in the US saying that you would consider potentially stopping purchases of Boeing on this tariff risk, and maybe look at COMAC, the Chinese producer. Is that a realistic threat, really, Michael?
I don't think so. I mean, the fundamental point of the letter, I was written to by some US lawmaker asking me not to guarantee that we won't buy Chinese aircraft, and I wrote back politely saying, go to hell. I'm not giving you, we will reserve the right to buy aircraft wherever we so wish. We remain
not certified yet, COMAC.
No, they're not certified and won't be certified for another 5 or 10 years. But I've been written to by some congressman in the US whose iPhone was made in China, asking Ryanair not to guarantee not to buy Chinese aircraft.
Yeah.
We would give no such guarantees. I mean, I don't see any great prospect of us buying a COMAC aircraft. The Boeing are making great aircraft. You look at our numbers this morning, an awful lot of which are being driven by the Boeing MAX 8200s. Those aircraft offer us 4% more seats. They're burning 16% less fuel. They're transforming our economics. And I think you add those new aircraft to the declining cost of oil for the foreseeable future. And I think not just Ryanair, but the airline sector in general looks set for 2 or 3 years of reasonably strong earnings.
Talk to us about the oil price. I mean, you're seeing prices now about $62 a barrel on Brent. You hedge around oil prices. Are you hedged to the upside, or are you well protected on lower prices?
No, I mean, we hedge straight for jet fuel into plane. We were hedged in the last year, so the results this morning, we were hedged at $79 a barrel. We're 85% hedged this year at about $76 a barrel, about a 4% fuel saving. We took advantage of the uncertainty post the Trump tariffs or Independence Day, whatever it was last month. We hedged about 40% of summer 2026 fuel at about $66 a barrel. This is jet. Jet at the moment, spot is about 67, Brent is 62. That's about a 13% saving on fuel into next year. Our annual fuel bill is about $5 billion. So if we could hedge out the remainder of next year at $66 a barrel, you're looking at savings of between $700-800 million going straight through to the bottom line, which would create an enormous opportunity for Ryanair to really meaningfully lower the cost of air travel across Europe next year.
Are you buying shares in Ryanair at this level?
We've started a share buyback today, another one. We did 2 last year, $750 million over the next 12 months. But
Can you step that up?
I don't think so. I mean, we're into a rising marketplace. Our shares have had a very good run. We're up 18% of the shares year to date. I don't want to be competing with other shareholders. If the share price is strong, other people are buying, we'd rather step back. But we're going to do a $750 million share buyback this year, and then I think the board will assess and see. What drives the business at the moment is we're very cash generative. Because of the Boeing aircraft delivery delays, we have surplus cash. And what we've always said to shareholders, when we have surplus cash, we'll return it by way of dividends or buybacks.
Just very briefly, could the current UK government be more bold in terms of trying to reset relations with the Europeans?
Yes, they could, but I think, thus far, and we wait to see what comes out of the UK-EU summit this morning. If they reduce some of the friction on air travel, like British citizens going to Europe can use the EU gates, vice versa. Young people now have more mobility between Europe and the UK. I think that would be very helpful. I think the thing they do need to do here in the UK, though, is remove these ridiculous restrictions on young Europeans coming here to work in the UK. If you're coming here to work, don't have some artificially high high wage rates. We need Europeans to come here to work in retail, in agriculture, for example. Without that, those sectors here in the UK are really struggling, and I think the UK needs to do more. But fundamentally, and I've been violently anti-Brexit for many years, the closer the the trading relationships are between the UK and the EU, the better it will be for the UK economy, for UK jobs, and therefore we will be very supportive of any steps that are taken to improve that.